welcome into Sports Bit Betting Insight today, Monday, September 26th. Paulie and Teddy, big game breakdown, Monday Night Football plus the Mets and the Marlins. And we'll recap college football in the deep dive and play of the day. Before we get to the NFL, Les Miles and Cam Cameron out in LSU. Running the high school offense, lost on the road to Auburn. Preseason number 5, 2 losses already, Teddy.
Yeah, I mean, I got to call this move what it is. Complete idiocy, okay? I can't imagine a dumber move by LSU. Ooh, let's panic and overreact. They sound like a square better. If you fire Miles now, before the end of September, you should have fired him last December when you were thinking about it. That's the way to do things right. And should you fire Miles? Hey, that's your decision. But the guy's had a 114-34 record at LSU, a 77% winning percentage. That's the best among modern-day LSU coaches. You know, the only SEC team with a better record than LSU in the Miles era was Alabama. There's no shame in that, Paulie. And, you know, call it what it is. I have no problem with Orgeron, but why September? A fraction of a second. It literally came down to a fraction of a second at Auburn on Saturday night. There was a difference here.
Yep, let's get rid of preseason polls, too. Oklahoma, LSU, Notre Dame, preseason top 10, all with 2 losses. Wait till they play 4 games, and you see Louisville come out of nowhere as well. All right, bad bets. Let's start with the Titans. We had the Raiders, our play of the day earlier in the week. How about going 0 for 3 with the reps in the final minute?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was a tough beat if you had Tennessee. I mean, not that Tennessee was the right side in that game. They weren't, but there were 3 huge calls in the final 30 seconds or so of that game, and the Titans went 0 for 3 on the, or I should say, calls or non-calls of the fourth down pass interference that in many games would have been flagged. In this game, it was not flagged. The Andre Johnson game-tying touchdown got wiped off the board. The no PI on fourth down on the incompletion with lots and lots of contact. Yeah, tough beat if you had the Titans, but it certainly wasn't the right side either.
Yep, another bad beat. David Purdom at ESPN Chalk on Twitter, at David Purdom on Twitter, rather. Somebody had a $1,500 8-team moneyline parlay, would have paid $150,000. Just needed the Giants. Whoops, couldn't get there. Horrible one there as he was close to cashing a big ticket. And how about the Colts? T.Y. Hilton. Well, they get the cover, Teddy, as Hilton scores. All they needed was a field goal for the win.
Oh, yeah, and that's all they wanted was the field goal for the win. I mean, T.Y. Hilton goes to the house in a situation that all they wanted was that game-winning field goal to win by 1, run down the clock, in which they would not have covered. The Chargers were bet down from +3 to 1.5. Of course, Indy wins by 4. But here's the question for you. What's the higher percentage? You know, I'm thinking that Hilton probably, in optimal strategy, doesn't happen often in the NFL. We'll talk about that throughout the course of this segment. But in optimal strategy, T.Y. Hilton's supposed to go down at the 1-yard line. Indy's supposed to kneel a couple times and then kick the field goal with no time left. Because the higher percentage play is Colts making an 18-yard field goal compared to Colts stopping San Diego with 1:17 on the clock and 2 timeouts from the Chargers from scoring a touchdown. The math says you're better off kneeling and taking a knee, but I don't often see a player flop at the 1-yard line unless they're coached by Bill Belichick.
Yep, some guys do it. You're right. That was supposed to be the correct move. Bad bets, a lot of them. Arizona, the Bills blow out the Cardinals.
Oh, yeah, the pros beat the Joes on Arizona-Buffalo. This was one of the bigger sharp square divide games of the day on Sunday. Zona took some wise guy money, but the Bills took some wise guy money, but the squares love the Cards on Sunday. They drove that line up from -4 to -5.5 or higher in some places, and this was a blowout right from the get-go. Arizona did not bring their A game.
Another bad bet, the Dolphins, our play of the day. They were up 11 in the second half, but
they were up 11 in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, right. Terrell Pryor got us. How about that?
I'll tell you what. I mean, Hugh Jackson coached circles around the Dolphins' defensive staff. They had a third-string quarterback. They had one player, one weapon in Terrell Pryor, and yet Cleveland the ball up and down the field all day. The kicker cost them the game. Of course, they just signed him off the waiver wire on Friday after a rare injury to the starting kicker in the walkthrough. But what a day for Terrell Pryor. Passing 3 of 5 for 35-yard, rushing 4 for 21 and a touchdown, receiving 8 for 144. When a team has one downfield weapon, you're supposed to be able to figure out how to stop them. Miami couldn't do that.
Yeah, and the Eagles are for real. They embarrass the Steelers. A lot of money on the Steelers. They get blown out.
Yeah, and look, let's not overreact to Philadelphia through 3 games. Let's not underreact to Philadelphia through 3 games, okay? When you look at the 4 teams right now that are 3-0 straight up, 3-0 against the spread, their quarterbacks, Sam Bradford, Carson Wentz, Jacoby Brissett, and Trevor Siemian. It's not exactly a who's who of elite quarterbacks in the NFL. But look at this tweet from ESPN Stats and Info. They're Philadelphia, the 11th team since 1990 to win their first 3 games of the season by 2 touchdowns or more. All previous 10 made the playoffs. 4 of them won the Super Bowl. I'll still take the under on Philly making the playoffs, and I'll definitely take the under on Philadelphia making the Super Bowl. Things have broken right for the Eagles the first 3 weeks. They played great yesterday. That does not make them an elite team.
Sharp square divide on the Sunday night game. Cowboys, they were bet from 7.5 down to 6.5. The 8-game home losing streak is over.
Yeah, I mean, they're due to win at least one home game every year, right?
Yeah.
There was a sharp square divide game on the Cowboys-Bears as well, and the squares got the right side of that one. The Cowboys, minus 7.5 all week. They were bet down to minus 6.5. Tons of quote-unquote sharp money, and they pretty much killed them. The Bears D was not a match for that elite offensive line, despite the left tackle Tyron Smith being inactive for the game with a back injury.
Bad for the books. The Ravens win, and it falls 2.
Oh, yeah. That was a tough result for the house. That line bounced between Pick'em and Baltimore 2.5 all week. The majority of the bets pushed or won regardless of which side they were betting, and that's never good for the house.
Yep, and the Packers bet down from 8. They were 8-point favorites, bet down to 6. It lands 7.
Yeah. It sure was, and again, another sharp square divide game, Paulie. All the sharp money was on Detroit. All the square money was on Green Bay. Both sides ended up cashing winning bets depending on when they bet it.
And plenty of wise guys on the LA Rams. The game that hurt my feelings, tough spot, traveling across the country. Tampa Bay was embarrassed in Arizona, and they put up 37 points. And apparently Jeff Fisher doesn't understand simple math.
Yeah, and look, the Bucs were up 20-10 in that game. I had Tampa in my pocket. I was feeling good about my wager at that point. Didn't work out. And Jameis Winston had a rough afternoon, which he doesn't have many of, but he had one yesterday that allowed LA to score I forgot, 37. Was brutal. But you talk about, this is the kind of stuff that honestly should get a coach fired, not get an extension. Okay? Fisher's got his extension. Here they are. They score a touchdown in the 4th quarter to go up by 11. All right. This is not a decision. You kick the extra point to go up by 12 because that's going to force your opponent to get 2 touchdowns to beat you. However, somehow or other, Jeff Fisher, his chart, his brain, math is hard, I guess, decides he's going to go for 2, which means a touchdown and a 2-point conversion and a field goal can tie the game. Wrong decision. Fisher clearly doesn't understand math. He's lucky it didn't come back to bite him.
Yeah, well said there. Up next, big game breakdown. Monday Night Football. The Falcons and the Saints and the Mets and the Marlins. We'll get back to college and the deep dive and the play of the day on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Catch today's MLB Odds Couple Show Monday, September 26th. A quirky time in the MLB season, right, Mike Brenner? The last week before the playoffs start, but we're on top of it.
Well,
we're on top of it.
There's some spots definitely that can be picked. So when you guys are all done, come on over to our house.
I got one in particular.
Back on SportsBit, time for a big game breakdown. As always, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Monday Night Football. Falcons hit the road to take on the Saints. Saints 2.5, 53.5 the total. The Saints thought firing Rob Ryan would help out the defense and bringing in Dennis Allen. That hasn't worked. 31st on Football Outsiders adjusted rankings. 2 sacks. 0 interceptions, 81 dropbacks, Teddy.
Yeah. Well, the key stat is 8.5 yards per pass. All right. When you have 8.5 yards per pass and 0 INTs, you're not playing good defense. Now, there has been improvement, Paulie. Let's be real about this. You said they were 31 on Football Outsiders adjusted ratings this year. Last year, they were number 32. They were dead last. So, see, they're getting better. But, of course, we talk about the 8.5 yards per pass. They've been just as bad against the run. They've given up, 230 on the ground already, 3 rushing touchdowns. Last week, the Giants were -3 in turnovers. The Giants were 0 of 3 in the red zone. and they still beat New Orleans. I'm telling you, Paulie, right now when it comes to NFL power ratings, at the very bottom, you got Tennessee, San Fran, Cleveland. All right? You probably have the Jaguars below the Saints. You maybe have the Bears below the Saints. That's about it. 5, count them on one hand, teams worse than New Orleans right now, and maybe I'm being a little bit generous to New Orleans, ranking them outside the bottom 5 in the NFL.
Opens the door for Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. Ryan off to the best start of his career, at least passer rating, 121.4. Julio Jones, 19 yards per catch and 2 touchdowns. They hope to continue their assault, which they did Sunday in the win last week at Oakland.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, for as good as the Falcons' offense has been so far, man, their defense hasn't been. They spent all the draft picks on defense, try to get better, and they aren't. We talked about New Orleans being number 31 on the FBO adjusted defensive stats. Guess who's number 32? That would be Atlanta, the only team worse than the Saints. They've given up 7 touchdown passes. They only allowed 1 interception, only gotten 1 sack. And it wasn't even a sack. The quarterback just ran out of bounds at the line of scrimmage. They got credited with a sack. They're also allowing 4.6 per rush. So we're talking about a Saints team that can't stop the run or the pass. We're talking about a Falcons team that can't stop the run or the pass. But, for Atlanta, they hired Dan Quinn because it was a defensive guy in Seattle. Maybe it's like the Jaguars hiring Gus Bradley because they're a defensive guy in Seattle, and it's not really working out in that regard. Haven't seen that Atlanta defense really step up yet.
Yeah, well, kind of like Belichick assistants too. And one more thing. Brian Billick said this, time for a new voice. He won a Super Bowl and they tuned him out in Baltimore. Maybe that's the case in New Orleans as well with Sean Payton. It's been a rough stretch there for the Saints.
The game's going on opposite the debate. All right, there's going to be the presidential debates. And I know there's a lot of people that are going to have one TV on one channel, be flipping back and forth between the two and all of that. But it's a situation where you wonder if the NFL wants to do something to make sure that this game is a little bit exciting. Because if not, it'll probably be one of the lowest rated Monday Night Football games of the year.
Yep, there you go. All right, Major League Baseball now, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. Mets and the Marlins from Miami. Mets $1.15, 8.5 the total. Cologne against Conley. Well, the terrible news with Jose Fernandez, the boating accident, just 24 years old, Teddy. And, you think the Marlins want to play a game, but the show must go on, Teddy. Sad but true.
Well, look, our job here is not to give memorials for Jose Fernandez. You can watch as many sappy memorials on 5 different channels as you want for Jose. Yes, it was a tragedy, and it really was a tragedy. From all indications, everyone loved this guy. He will be missed, no question. But guess what? We're all going to die. Every one of us. You guys are going to die. I'm going to die. Paulie's going to die. Some of us are going to die young, unfortunately. Our job is not to mourn the dead. Our job is to help you find the silver lining in any tragedy. What's the best way to celebrate Jose Fernandez's life? Let's try to make some money off it.
All right. Well, we're not supposed to die at 24, but all right. The Mets have nothing but baseball.
No, I mean, but you're not supposed to die. We're all going there, Paul. We're all going there. It's a tragedy. I admit. My condolences to his family. My condolences to the Marlins, etc., etc. But it's inevitable, man. I know that you're not supposed to die young and all of that. It sucks. It really does. But we're not here to be sappy. We're here to make money. Fact.
Mets have nothing but baseball on their minds. Every game a must-win, trying to get this wild card. They're 83-73. San Francisco's 82-74. St. Louis with the loss last night, 81-74. And how about this? I mean, with all the injuries, they can count on and trust Bartolo Colon, Big Sexy.
It's crazy. All the starters that the Mets have, and it's Bartolo Colon who's been their best guy down the stretch since August 1st. 11 starts for Bartolo Colon. He's 5-2 with a 2.10 ERA. He's worked 68.2 innings at a time where injuries to other starters made it big for Bartolo Colon to step up. I don't know if I'm a Mets fan. If there's anyone else I'd rather have on the hill tonight against Miami.
Yep. Up next, we get to college recap. The Stanford-UCLA game. Arizona State Cal. Wild finishes. And Washington-Arizona went to overtime as well. We'll get to all that in the play of the day on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
Back on Sports Pit, Paulie and Teddy, college recap in the deep dive. Play of the day coming up, the bad beats. Oh my God. Arizona State Cal, 45 points in the fourth quarter, and Arizona State gets the cover, and it goes over as they return the onside kick with 40 seconds left. That was madness.
Insanity. I mean, look, there were 3 non-offensive touchdowns in the last 2 minutes. In the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter, when you have 3 big play non-offensive TDs, that's ridiculous, including the late onside kick getting brought back to the house. That game was 27-20 with less than 10 minutes to play. And if you had an under 85 ticket and you didn't cash, man, that is brutal.
Yeah, well, if you had UCLA early, that's just as bad. I mean, maybe the cover of the decade for Stanford. They are down. They have 9 points. They haven't scored a touchdown the whole game. Shaw milks the clock, challenges, and then punts anyways on 4th and short, but Byrne takes them down the field after they get a stop, and then they get the strip sack. The UCLA sets up with the Hail Mary, and they pick it up and run it in. 22-13 Stanford. Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, that was insanity. But I mean, that's the way college football Saturdays are. We talk about point spread hijinks. Remember, Stanford, they were -3. They were bet down to -2.5. You know, they weren't going to cover. It would have been either a push or most bettors would have pushed. Some bettors were covering with Stanford already before that final sack, fumble, touchdown. But all the pushes were taken out of play, and all the UCLA bettors crying in their beers. Brutal beat at the end of that one.
At CG Technology here in Las Vegas, a $200,000 swing on that game with the touchdown on the final play, and David Shaw, horrible in that game, but it worked out at the end because Burns took him down the field. How about some fun? Check out that Indiana Wake Forest box score.
Yeah. Sure does. You know, -5 turnover margin goes a long way in a football game. Let's just put it that way. Wake Forest, 4-0 right now for the first time since 2006 when they went to the Orange Bowl. How about this? Right now, Wake Forest has more wins than Notre Dame, Oklahoma. Let's throw BYU in there too. Combined, that's Wake Forest. Not bad at the end of September, most of the way through September.
Yep. Another bad beat, West Virginia. They're inside the 5-yard line, and they fumble.
Oh, yeah. Brutal. You know, they're first and goal at the 4. The quarterback, they didn't fumble. The quarterback was changing the play call. They probably would have gotten a touchdown on that play, but instead the center snapped the ball into his knee. BYU recovered. The Cougars come through the back doors. But then again, BYU had 280 rushing yards, 7 yards per carry. They weren't really a wrong side, even if they did come through the back door and avoid the front door cover right at the end.
Oh, if you had Pitt on the money line. Trubisky takes North Carolina down the field. They convert not 1, not 2, but 3 fourth downs and score with 2 seconds left.
That was insane. I had the over in that game. It was the same story, Pitt money line versus the over. That's where you needed every one of those fourth down, and none of them were easy, you know. They were 4th and 6, 4th and 8, and guys holding onto the ball with their fingertips. Brutal loss for Panther bettors on the money line. They were certainly the right side.
Yeah, how about Oklahoma State and Arkansas with long drives inside the 2-yard line, and both teams fumble?
Yeah, I mean, Oklahoma State, what were they going to tie the score at that point? And then Baylor scored the last TD to end up winning and covering that contest. And Arkansas, they were about to go up 7. They fumbled at the 1-inch line in a tie game. They were ruining it for an hour. And then A&M scores the next 3 touchdowns. Those 2 fumbles, absolutely brutal, whether you had the Cowboys or the Razorbacks.
Tulane, Louisiana Lafayette, the total bet from 49 down to 46.5. Dead nuts under 16-16, but it goes to 4 overtimes, and that was one of 4 games that went from under to over because of OT.
Yeah, Idaho, UNLV. Under tickets, no good. Washington, Arizona. Under tickets, crash and burn. Vandy, Western Kentucky. Dead nuts under all game. Oops, goes over in overtime. So 4 different totals swing from under to over and overtime. And that's not even counting that insanity of the Arizona State Cal finish.
Yeah, all right, bad bets, plenty of them. How about Iowa? Bet up from 14 all the way up to 17, and they just have to hang on to beat Rutgers on the road.
Yeah, you can't cover -17 if you don't score 17 points. Lots of Iowa money that did not cash.
Yeah, Oregon lost outright to Colorado's backup quarterback. Embarrassing. Helfrich, get him out of there.
Yeah. Helfrich's job security has gone from, or his seat has gotten a whole lot warmer the last 2 weeks. Let's put it that way. Tons of Ducks money in that contest. let's give Colorado some credit. Mike McIntyre's team's playing pretty darn well.
Yeah, heavy steam on Washington. No Solomon, no Wilson. Bet from 10 all the way up to 17. I like that backup quarterback who came in. Reminds me of Kaepernick. He had a long touchdown run. Game goes to overtime. Never in doubt. Washington survives, though.
Yeah, and this was a great result for the house. They loved this ball game. Lots of money came on Washington. I don't know if there was anyone that took more money on Saturday than Washington. I'm real interested to see what Jimmy Vaccaro says about this game when he gives our recap of the weekend that was for the sports books, like he does every single Tuesday right here on SportsBit.
The drought's over. The 11-game losing streak to Florida ends. Tennessee, they came back, and Florida blew the 21-point lead.
You know, I'm not sure if the Gators were a bad bet or a bad beat or none of the above, but when the underdog is leading by 3 touchdowns and doesn't win or cover, it's tough. And there was a ton of Florida money. Remember, that line was as high as 7.5 at the open, and it was bet down to 4 at the close. The books cleaned up on the Florida-Tennessee game as the Vols snapped that streak.
No, sorry, and bad for the books. Run it down, Teddy. Let's start with Virginia Tech. 10.5, bet up to 14.5. They thump East Carolina.
Yeah, they sure did. How about Gerard Evans, I should say, a guy that we've talked about a couple of times on this show already. 67% completion, 970 yards, 13 touchdowns, 1 pick. He's 4th in the nation in pass efficiency and the only quarterback to have at least 13 touchdowns and fewer than 2 INTs. This was a disastrous result. Well, I don't know what disastrous. It certainly was a good result for the house. All the Virginia Tech money came in and all the Virginia Tech money cashed.
Yeah, how about Central Florida and Syracuse?
Yeah, well, I mean, UCF had lost 15 straight games against Division I foes. Yet they were bet up from -6 to -10.5 on the road at FIU. They killed them. Wise guys cleaned up on this one. And Syracuse, they opened +6. They closed +1.5. They won outright at UConn. And, man, if you were watching that game, looking at that UConn offense, even against a bottom-tier defense, they just can't trade points with anybody.
Yeah, a couple more bad for the books. Big steam, 6-point move in this Mississippi State UMass total. Bet up from 44 all the way up to 50. Finished with 82 points on Miami of Ohio. 20-point dogs bet down to 13. At Cincy nearly pulled the upset. And oh boy, disaster as Marshall's quarterback was out. Louisville, 24 up to 31.5. It fell 31.
Yeah, that was literally probably the worst possible final score for the books in Las Vegas and offshore. To win by exactly 31, that means all the Louisville money that came in all week 1 and anyone that took back Marshall at 31.5 or 31 either won or pushed, books didn't cash a single bet, some books, on that particular ball game.
Yes, all right, money time. Play of the day, 2-2 weekend, 13-6-1 in football. Fade or follow, no complaining. We can't control if Sparty's going to hand Wisconsin 21 points. So that was a tough one there. Raiders with a win, and the Dolphins win but don't cover. In Utah, thank you very much. They got the money for us on Friday. Back to Monday Night Football, Teddy. What are we doing?
Well, we have the number 31 ranked defense facing off against the number 32 ranked defense. We have 2 good quarterbacks. The only question is whether they're going to be field goals or touchdowns, because we know these teams are moving back and forth across the field. I'm willing to bet it's going to be touchdowns. Let's look at the Falcons and the Saints. Over 53.5. That's our play of the day.
All right, very good. Always fun on a Monday. We're back tomorrow. Jimmy Vaccaro, as Teddy talked about earlier. Recap Major League Baseball. Only 1 week left. We'll see if somebody else can clinch on Monday. Thanks for the uptick in views. Spread the word. We're back Tuesday on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.